It was supposed to be a quiet Sunday breakfast at a small-town diner, a rare moment for the Thompson family to reconnect over pancakes and coffee. But when two local cops walked in, their eyes locked onto Marcus Thompson and his family with a cold, unwarranted suspicion. What those officers didn't know was that Marcus, a decorated Navy SEAL with years of covert operations under his belt, wasn't just a father enjoying a meal. He was a man trained to handle any threat, including the one about to unfold. Marcus Thompson sat at the worn Formica table in Rosie's diner. His broad shoulders relaxed but his eyes alert, a habit ingrained from years of service. His wife Lena was next to him, her warm smile lighting up as she helped their 8-year-old daughter Aisha cut her pancakes into bite-sized pieces. Their teenage son Jamal scrolled through his phone, earbuds in, occasionally chuckling at something he saw. The diner smelled of bacon and fresh coffee, and the low hum of conversation from other patrons filled the air. It was a moment of normalcy, a break from Marcus's demanding life, and he cherished it. The bell above the diner's door jingled, and Marcus's gaze flicked up instinctively. 2 police officers, both white, stepped inside. Their uniforms were crisp, their postures rigid, and their eyes scanned the room like they were looking for trouble. Marcus noticed the way their attention lingered on his family, longer than it did on the other patrons, mostly white families and a few truckers. He felt the familiar weight of scrutiny, but he pushed it aside. He wasn't here to make waves. He just wanted to eat with his family. Lena leaned over, her voice soft. "You okay, Marcus? You're doing that thing with your jaw again." She knew his tells, the subtle signs of tension he couldn't fully hide, even after all these years. "I'm fine," Marcus said, offering her a reassuring smile. "Just hungry." He reached for his coffee, keeping the officers in his peripheral vision. The officers, Officer Daniel Hargrove and Officer Tom Kessler, took a booth near the counter. Hargrove, the older of the two, had a weathered face and a permanent scowl. Kessler, younger and leaner, followed his partner's lead, his eyes darting back to the Thompsons' table. Marcus caught the look but kept his focus on Aisha, who was now telling a story about her science project. He nodded along, encouraging her, but his senses stayed sharp. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Betty with a kind but tired face, brought the officers their menus. Hargrove barely glanced at his before muttering something to Kessler, who smirked. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but the tone was sharp, and the glance they threw his way was unmistakable. He felt Lena's hand brush his under the table, a silent check-in. He squeezed her fingers lightly, signaling he was still calm. Jamal pulled out one earbud, sensing the shift in his father's demeanor. "What's up, Dad?" he asked, his voice low. "Nothing, son," Marcus said, keeping his tone even. "Just eat your food." But the atmosphere in the diner had changed. The officer's presence seemed to cast a shadow over the Thompsons' table, even if no one else noticed. Betty came by to refill their coffee, her smile faltering as she caught Hargrove's stare. She quickly moved on, avoiding eye contact. Hargrove leaned toward Kessler, his voice just loud enough for Marcus to catch fragments. "Don't belong here. Trouble." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his focus on his family. He'd dealt with this before, too many times. Growing up in a small town not unlike this one, he'd learned early how to navigate suspicion, how to keep his head down when needed. But he wasn't that kid anymore. He was a man who'd faced death in deserts and jungles, who'd protected his country while enduring its prejudices. Lena noticed the officer's attention too. She kept her voice light for Aisha's sake, asking about her school project, but her eyes met Marcus's, and he saw the worry there. She'd always been his anchor, the one who reminded him to breathe when the world pressed too hard. He gave her a small nod, a promise that he'd keep things under control. The situation escalated when Hargrove stood and approached their table. His boots thudded against the linoleum floor, and the diner grew quieter as heads turned. Marcus kept his posture relaxed, but every muscle was ready, coiled like a spring. He'd been trained to assess threats in an instant, and Hargrove's approach screamed trouble. "Morning," Hargrove said, his tone clipped. He stood too close to the table, his hand resting on his belt near his holster. "Mind if I ask what brings you folks here?" Marcus met his gaze, calm but unflinching. "Just having breakfast with my family," he said. His voice was steady, measured, the kind of tone that could de-escalate or command depending on what was needed. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "You from around here?" "No," Marcus said. "We're passing through. On our way to visit family." Kessler joined his partner, standing slightly behind him, his hand also near his holster. The diner was now silent, every patron watching. Aisha looked up, confused, her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Lena put a gentle hand on her daughter's arm, keeping her calm. "Passing through, huh?" Hargrove said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "You got ID on you?" Marcus's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice even. "Is there a reason you need to see it, officer?" Hargrove's face hardened. "Just making sure everything's in order. We've had some trouble around here lately, and I like to know who's coming through my town." "Your town?" Marcus said, raising an eyebrow. He kept his tone neutral, but the challenge was clear. He reached slowly for his wallet, making sure his movements were deliberate, non-threatening. He pulled out his driver's license and slid it across the table. Hargrove picked it up, studying it like he was looking for a forgery. Kessler leaned over, glancing at the ID, then at Marcus. "Military, huh?" Kessler said, noting the veteran designation on the license. "What branch?" "Navy," Marcus said simply. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Hargrove handed the ID back, his expression unchanged. "You mind stepping outside for a minute? Just want to have a quick word." Lena's hand tightened on Marcus's arm, but she didn't speak. She knew better than to escalate things in front of the kids. Jamal, however, wasn't as restrained. "Why can't you talk here?" he asked, his voice sharp. "We're just eating." "Jamal," Marcus said quietly, a warning in his tone. His son sat back, fuming but silent. "I'd rather not disrupt our meal," Marcus said to Hargrove. "If you've got questions, I'm happy to answer them here." Hargrove's face reddened. "I'm not asking, sir. I'm telling you to step outside." The diner was dead silent now. Betty stood frozen behind the counter, clutching a coffee pot. A few patrons looked away, uncomfortable, while others stared openly. Marcus weighed his options. He could comply, keep things calm for his family's sake. Or he could push back, call out the obvious bias driving this encounter. But he knew how that would look. A black man arguing with cops in a small-town diner. He'd seen how those stories ended. "All right," Marcus said, standing slowly. "Let's step outside." Lena's eyes widened, but she stayed quiet, her hand resting protectively on Aisha's shoulder. Jamal started to stand, but Marcus shot him a look that pinned him to his seat. "Stay with your mom and sister," he said, his voice firm but calm. Outside, the morning air was crisp, the parking lot mostly empty except for a few cars and the officer's cruiser. Hargrove and Kessler flanked Marcus, their postures aggressive, like they were cornering a suspect. Marcus kept his hands visible, his stance relaxed but ready. Years of training had taught him how to stay calm under pressure, how to read body language, how to anticipate moves before they happened. "What's this really about, officer?" Marcus asked, his voice low but direct. Hargrove crossed his arms. "Like I said, we've had trouble around here. Folks like you coming through, stirring things up." "Folks like me," Marcus repeated, his tone even but laced with steel. "You mean families eating breakfast?" "Don't get smart," Kessler snapped, stepping closer. "We know your type." Marcus's eyes flicked to Kessler, assessing. The younger officer was eager, itching for a confrontation. Hargrove was the bigger threat, calmer, more calculated, but no less prejudiced. Marcus had dealt with men like them before, in and out of uniform. He knew their playbook. I'm not looking for trouble, Marcus said. I just want to finish my meal and get back on the road with my family. Hargrove smirked. Then you won't mind if we search your car, will you? Just to be safe. Marcus's patience was wearing thin, but he kept his composure. You got a warrant for that? Don't need one if you consent, Hargrove said, his tone almost taunting. Unless you've got something to hide. Marcus's mind raced. He knew his rights, knew they had no probable cause. But he also knew that refusing could escalate things, put his family at risk. He thought of Lena and the kids inside, watching through the diner's windows. He couldn't let this spiral. Before he could respond, the diner's door swung open and Lena stepped out, her expression a mix of worry and determination. Marcus, everything okay? She called, her voice steady but firm. Ma'am, stay back, Kessler said, holding up a hand. Don't talk to my wife like that, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous now. The shift in his tone made Kessler pause, his hand hovering near his holster. Hargrove stepped forward, trying to regain control. All right, let's all calm down. We're just having a conversation. No, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the tension. You're harassing me and my family for no reason. I've given you my ID, answered your questions. We're done here. Hargrove's face twisted with anger, but before he could respond, a new voice cut in. What's going on out here? It was Sheriff Linda Hayes, pulling into the lot in her cruiser. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, known for running a tight ship. Marcus had never met her, but he'd heard her name mentioned in the diner earlier. Hargrove and Kessler stiffened. Just checking on some folks, Sheriff, Hargrove said, his tone suddenly deferential. Hayes stepped out of her cruiser, her eyes moving from the officers to Marcus. That's so. Looks like more than a check-in to me. Marcus seized the moment. Sheriff, my name's Marcus Thompson. My family and I were having breakfast when your officers decided to single us out. They've got no cause to ask for my ID or search my car. Hayes's gaze sharpened as she looked at Hargrove and Kessler. That true? Hargrove started to speak, but Hayes cut him off. I'm asking Mr. Thompson. Marcus nodded. Yes, ma'am. They approached us without cause, and when I questioned it, they insisted on taking this outside. Hayes turned to her officers, her expression hard. You two in my cruiser. Now. Hargrove hesitated, but Kessler tugged at his arm and they complied. Hayes looked back at Marcus. I'm sorry for this, Mr. Thompson. You and your family go back to your meal. I'll handle my officers. Marcus nodded, his jaw still tight. Appreciate that, Sheriff. As he walked back into the diner, Lena met him at the door, her eyes searching his. You okay? She asked softly. Yeah, he said, pulling her close for a moment. Let's finish breakfast. Inside, Aisha looked up, her eyes wide. Dad, why were those cops being mean? Marcus knelt beside her, forcing a smile. Some people just make mistakes, baby. It's okay now. Jamal wasn't so easily placated. That wasn't a mistake, Dad. That was. I know, Marcus cut in, his voice gentle but firm. We'll talk about it later, all right? The family sat back down, but the mood was different now. The other patrons avoided their eyes, and the diner felt colder. Betty came by with fresh coffee, her hands shaking slightly. I'm so sorry, she whispered. That shouldn't have happened. Marcus nodded, his expression softening. Not your fault. As they ate, Marcus kept one eye on the parking lot, where Hayes was speaking animatedly with Hargrove and Kessler. He didn't know what would come of it, but he knew one thing. He'd protected his family, not with fists or weapons, but with the calm, unyielding strength he'd honed over years of service. And that was enough for now. The Thompsons finished their meal, paid their bill, and left the diner. As they drove away, Marcus glanced at his family in the rearview mirror. Lena reached over, resting her hand on his. You did good, she said quietly. He nodded, his eyes on the road. Always will.